Today, we welcome Army Wife Network sponsor First Command Financial Services with guests Mr. Mark Steffe, First Command President, CEO, and Nidhi Talati, Associate Director in First Command's Financial Planning Department and Certified Financial Planner. Mark, I'm excited to chat with you again, and Nidhi, really pumped to meet you virtually with this conversation. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be back, Sharita. Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
Well, given the last 6, 7, 8 months or however long it's been now with all things Corona, COVID, there's been a lot of developments in the financial world from a military family perspective. So I'm really interested to kind of dig into that. Mark, my first question is for you. You've been a frequent guest here on Army Wife Network. So would you go ahead and remind our listeners what services that First Command offers for military families?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, Sharita. Thank you. The primary service we offer military families is financial coaching. And at First Command, financial coaching means we're going to start by helping you develop a financial plan, which is really your roadmap to get you from where you are today to where you want to be 5 or 10 or 15 years down the road. And at First Command, we don't just help you make the plan, we actually help you implement that plan as well. And what that means for us is that we're going to focus on what we call the 3 cornerstones. And the 3 cornerstones of a financial plan mean there's an insurance piece, there's an investment piece, and there's a banking piece. So along the way, you're going to have a financial coach to make sure that you stay on track with that financial plan. So not only are we going to help you construct that financial plan initially, we're going to coach you along the way to make sure that you stay on track with that financial plan and make the necessary adjustments along the way. And one of the things I'm proudest about with First Command is that when that inevitable PCS comes for a military family, because we have 180 offices around the world and most of them near a military installation, we will actually transfer the client's account from the current advisor to a local advisor at that new duty station so that face-to-face personalized coaching can continue throughout the life of the relationship.
Thanks for bringing us up to speed, Mark. I know we have new listeners joining us each week with our podcast, and you already know I'm such a huge fan of First Command. And one of my favorite things about First Command Financial Services is the fact that if you belong to an active duty military family, you don't pay for financial planning services at First Command. Would you expound on that for us?
I'd be happy to. It's one of my favorite things too, to be honest with you. I think the average American thinks that financial planning is a high-end service and it's only available to the wealthy. They don't think financial planning is even available to them. And if it was available, they probably assume they couldn't afford it. But that's not true at First Command. We've really tried to change that dynamic. We are committed to serving the financial needs of our nation's active duty military families. And we know that the best way to get started, the best way to get financially squared away is through a financial plan. And we also know that the earlier in your career that you start planning, the better chance you have of getting and staying on a path of financial security. So what we wanted to do was remove any reason to not go have a financial plan built for a military family. We want to take costs completely off the table. So unlike a lot of companies, we don't charge active duty military families for the creation of that financial plan that is so critical to their financial success.
I think that's so cool that you all are so intentional about removing those barriers, because it like creating a financial plan, even early in your military career, or even like us kind of midway on the tail end of it, can be quite intimidating. So honestly, sometimes we kind of look for those barriers of, well, it costs money, or, well, I don't know. But the fact that you guys take that off the table, it opens the door for creating that financial empowerment that I think so many military families want and need as they move forward. Let's think about what's happening in our world right now and dive into an important financial change that's really been a buzz online lately for most military families. And that change is the Social Security tax deferral. Mark, what is this and what exactly does that mean for military families?
Yeah, I'll give you the quick overview of this, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nidhi, and she's going to address how this is going to impact military families. So the background is that in August, President Trump issued an executive memo which allows employers to defer the collection of payroll taxes, which are used to fund Social Security benefits. And that order is in place from September of this year through December of this year. The federal government will be implementing this deferral for all federal employees, including armed services. Now, if you worked in the private sector, it's an option whether you you accept this deferral or not. Mm-hmm. But if you're in the military, there is no option. So this is going to happen whether you want it to or not. It's mandatory. But this is a deferral, not a forgiveness. And while there's some discussion of it being forgiven in the future, we obviously can't count on that to happen, and we need to be prepared for the fact that it might not happen. So the safest assumption for now is that the deferred tax is going to be collected later, and Nidhi's going to give us the details on how that's going to work.
And so here's what this means for military families. To start with, you have your baseline level of usual take-home pay. And in September, the usual Social Security tax withholding was stopped. So at that time, take-home pay increased by about 6% for affected families. And that's going to continue up until the end of the year, like you said. In January, that deferral is going to come to an end. So at that time, take-home pay is going to drop. But it's not just going to go back down to the baseline level. It's going to go even lower than that. Why? Because not only are they going to start collecting the usual payroll tax again, but they're also going to collect the back taxes that were deferred. So in effect, January through April is going to feel a little bit like a pay cut. Now, it's important for families to know that this cut is coming so that they can be ready for it. You can prepare by making sure to save the extra money that's coming home today. Encourage you to put it aside into a savings account so you don't accidentally spend it. And then when take-home pay drops starting in January, you can use those savings to make up for that pay cut and make your budget whole again. You might be wondering who this actually applies to. So the initial information had suggested that the deferral would only apply to service members whose monthly rate of basic pay was less than $8,666. But recent guidance has clarified that this is actually an after deductions threshold. So let's consider it per paycheck. If your gross pay is less than $4,333 after certain eligible deductions, then your payroll taxes will be deferred. The eligible deductions in this case include pre-tax benefits, such as TRICARE dental or flexible spending accounts and so on. Generally, we expect that this mandatory deferral is going to apply to all enlisted service members and all 01 through 04. Some 05 and above could also be affected if their gross pay falls below that $4,333 threshold based on the deductions that they may be taking. A good course of action is to grab your LES from August and September and compare them. This way, you'll be able to confirm whether your taxes were deferred or not, and if so, by how much, so that you know exactly how much to set aside.
Thanks for clarifying those things, Nidhi. I know that recently when this was announced a couple of months ago, there was a lot of confusion surrounding this and kind of what do we do now? What does this really mean for us? And so that information really helps to clarify a few things in that regard. Let's switch gears just a touch. Obviously, it goes without saying, this is a challenging time for many military families. Perhaps a loss of second income due to furloughs or just simple job loss during the pandemic. It's truly just been devastating. So, Nidhi, what advice would you give families who are going through this?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the truth is today that experiencing a loss of income would be a major challenge for most any family. Mm-hmm. Most families that have two incomes rely on both of them to meet their obligations day to day. A lot of families carry a lot of debt. And a significant portion of their earnings actually goes to servicing that debt. So if your family experiences a loss of income, one thing you can consider doing is to contact those creditors, talk through the situation, and see if they can offer any relief. Especially with the current situation that we're all dealing with, many companies are willing to find ways to support their clients. This could include deferred payments, skipped payments, waived fees, and so on. One important thing, though, just make sure that you understand the arrangement well, both the short-term and long-term impacts, before you agree to it. Federal student loans is another area. This is a kind of debt that specifically has been called out for relief under the CARES Act, and payments have been waived through the end of the year. Other types of student debt might also have waiver and relief options. So again, contact the lender and talk through to see what they might be able to offer you.
Those are excellent points, Nidhi. We'd also encourage families to look for small savings that can be generated from the changed family circumstances. You might not be spending as much on gas right now with so many people working from home or working virtually, and so you don't have that commute anymore. Lots of folks aren't going out and buying lunch because, again, they're not in the office. And And many folks aren't grabbing that morning coffee, and that might not sound like a big deal, but it's a big enough deal that I actually, on my way to work this morning, I was listening to the radio, and CNBC was actually talking about on satellite radio. They were talking about the impact that people not buying coffee in the morning is actually having on the economy. So it's probably a bigger deal than you might even realize. So if it made CNBC, it's probably an important thing. You might only be using one vehicle right now rather than both, and you might be able to reduce the insurance on one of those vehicles because you're not taking it out of the garage or out of the driveway as much. So it might be an opportunity to reduce the level of insurance, at least temporarily, that you have on that second vehicle. Again, a lot of these things, you look at them and you think, well, they're small changes. Is it really a big deal? Well, all those small changes add up to be big changes, especially if you think of them not just on a daily basis, but those days turn into weeks and then into months and then to years. Those amounts really add up. So acting on these opportunities and directing those savings for another purpose can help alleviate at least some of that financial strain.
That's really solid guidance to kind of pull up and look from a kind of a higher level, a higher perspective, kind of long term, because I feel like the last few months have got us very much down in the moment of the right now, but really looking up kind of higher to say, wow, I've saved $100 this month because I haven't gone to Starbucks every other day. Or, Starbucks, I love Starbucks. And so not bashing on them at all, but I go to Starbucks, I spend at least $5, right? Each swipe. So if I'm not going every other day, I could be saving $50 or $100 a month. And that's really smart to think about those small little tweaks and changes that might have a long-term impact. We've talked about some of the do's during this time with Social Security deferrals and really understanding that and really making that financial plan. Mark, what are some of the things military families who are struggling with finances should not do or maybe avoid during this season?
That is a great question. And so often we focus on the do's, we forget the don'ts. So I'm glad you're asking. When faced with financial hardship, the first thing many are tempted to do is to stop funding their financial plans. It's important that you don't rob from your retirement plan to fund what's going on today, however. And the easy thing to do, or the easy thing to say is, well, I'll just save less, or I won't put as much money in my TSP, or maybe I'll just cancel my insurance policy. But what if, God forbid, something tragic happens in your family? That's the reasons you had the insurance in the first place. So the need to protect your family's long-term financial security doesn't diminish just because the current economic situation or because maybe one spouse isn't working right now. If anything, the need to protect your family gets more critical in these times. And so we really want folks to kind of dig down, not take the easy path out, not rob from their future, and really buckle down and try to find cost savings that they can take out of their budget now, as opposed to, as I said, robbing from that financial plan.
Yeah, that's right, Mark. Good habits like saving and investing are so easy to break, but then so very hard to get back into. And the truth is, the long-term opportunity cost could be significant. There's a very real cost to skipping contributions to retirement plans, like TFPs and IRAs. For one thing, you'll miss out on the long-term growth potential of the contributions you don't make, right? You're never going to get that. But you could also miss out on the immediate benefits, like the matching contributions that you would have gotten if you're in the blended retirement system. If you don't make contributions, you don't get those matching dollars. And it's really hard to make up for that over time.
That makes a lot of sense, Nidhi. And I know in a previous conversation with Mark, he mentioned once that the best time to start, that financial plan, that retirement plan is 20 years ago. And the second best time is today. And thinking about the right now versus later, it is challenging because we very much live in a society of instant gratification. But even though it looks like it might help on a surface level, it's really going to hurt military families and those folks long term. I look at my husband and I, we just got, a financial report from our TSP, and the growth that we would have missed out on over the last quarter is pretty impressive. I think it was 14.8%. And so we're like almost 15% growth that if we would have stopped that or put the woe on, or even worse, withdrawn, that would have really hurt us long term. So really appreciate you bringing that to light. Let's think about some of the even more challenging things during the season And it's almost like a dirty word in the male spouse world of deployment. Obviously, we have some spouses that are holding down the fort while their services member is deployed, whether pandemic or not. And sometimes we do that in a new place, like right after a PCS. Mark, will you share with us about some financial tips for that specific solution?
Absolutely. This is a great time, probably more so than ever, to be really honest about your needs versus your wants. And most of us tend to expand our lifestyle to the level of our earnings or beyond. And over time, this adds up to lots of expenditures that we could probably do without. So I can think back on my own life. When I made less money, I spent less money. I didn't have as many things, right? And then my income started to increase over time, as everyone's does. And then you find out, you seem to need more things or certainly want more things. And then you look around your house like, how do we get all this stuff, right? And so that tends to be the path that most of us follow. But cutting them out would certainly help bridge the immediate income gap. If you can really sit down and say, is this something I really need to have or just something we really want to have? And a great way to do that is to go back and pull an old bank statement, an old credit card statement, and to see where your money is going, to really sit down and understand where that money is flowing. And then you can have a more informed decision about needs versus wants. But there's an ongoing benefit of reducing lifestyle expenses. Down the road, when the family's earnings get back to a normal level, and it will happen, exactly when, nobody knows, but things will get back to some version of normal. Then when that happens, if we've found those savings, we become accustomed to living on less, and therefore we're more easily able to save that additional income when that income comes back. And that helps us achieve our long-term goals and makes us better prepared for any future emergencies, because hopefully there won't be another COVID or global pandemic, but something's going to happen down the road. And this will better position our military families to take that, more head on if and when that time comes.
Yeah, I always think I would say almost amusing how we during different seasons we'll cut back or get rid of something. And then a few months later, we're like, we don't actually really miss that. Interesting. So it's always, and I think it takes some discipline to be like, all right, we didn't actually miss it, so we don't need to add that back in. Really smart to think in that perspective. Do you have any advice for families to financially prepare ahead of time for those future challenges that you mentioned? Because unfortunately, it's life. Something's always going to happen. And I think one of your pillars, one of your focal points is that preparation, that being proactive to be empowered. So what would you tell families to prepare for the future?
Yeah, thank you for that. And the word empowerment that you use frequently, Sharita, is so strong and it's so meaningful to folks, especially the time with so much uncertainty, and we feel so reactive to things. That idea of empowerment and taking that control back is critical. And one of the ways folks can do that now, especially with sheltering at home or working remotely, this is a great time to sit down with your spouse and update your budget. Sit down and together and estimate your expenses, pull those statements that I mentioned a minute ago, and really understand clearly. Don't just guess or speculate or do it from memory. Get the facts in front of you and really understand, how you're spending your money, where that money is going. Determine then how you're going to track everything and stay on top of it on a weekly or monthly basis. For me, I'm a little OCD, so weekly would probably work, but monthly probably works for lots of folks. But something that's going to hold you accountable, and put it in writing, because once you put it in writing, it has a lot more meaning, and you're a lot clearer when it's in writing as opposed to just doing it from memory. You might find that you're able to allocate some extra savings to your long-term goals, especially again with the reduction in gas expenses, or people aren't going out to eat or going to movies or having those entertainment expenses like we had several months back. And consider moving that money to a savings account, or possibly, if you're not fully funding your TSP, take a look at putting the money there as well. Make sure that you and your spouse know where your financial documents are, along with the passwords to those accounts. You could also make a book with the information in it. So whether you do it on the computer or you do it the old school way on paper, just make sure everybody knows where to find that information, so that in case of emergency, you or your spouse can find that information pretty easily.
Another thing you can do at this time, in addition to getting your budget and documents organized, this is also a great time to update your financial plan. This does several things. Not only does it help bring everything together into one comprehensive plan to know where you're going, but it also helps make sure that the things that you're doing today align with the goals of where you're trying to get down the road. In addition to long-term goals like retirement, we can take an opportunity to make sure that we've got a plan for the short-term priorities. It might be saving for a home purchase, for example, or other things that are important to your family. Having an emergency fund and adequate life insurance. We've talked about how critical these are for the financial security of any family. So we want to make sure that we have a plan to address those if we haven't already done that. Working with an advisor to build a plan will confirm that all of these things are being addressed. And here's the best part. If you're one of those families that's already gotten a head start and made a financial plan, one of my favorite things about the update process is to see the progress that you've made since you got started. We talked earlier about the motivation and the discipline to stay the course and be disciplined with how we use our money. We talked about that theme of empowerment. Nothing helps a family be more empowered and committed to staying the course, to look back and see the progress they've made, and to look ahead and that they know they've got a solid plan how they're going to get where they want to be. So take this opportunity and get that financial plan in order if you haven't already done that.
It's so interesting. It's like financial empowerment begets financial empowerment. Like just thinking about that from a personal perspective gets me so pumped up because I'll confess right now, like finances used to really intimidate me. Like I didn't know any of these things. And I was like, well, because I don't know, I'm just going to keep not knowing because heaven forbid I admit I don't know what I'm doing. But First Command has changed the game for me personally, and I would say long-term for our family, just because we've had such a great encouragement working here with an agent here in El Paso. And you guys are doing awesome work really to take military families and shift them from maybe being a little anxious or uninformed or intimidated by financial plans, future insurance, investment, all those things that we probably didn't learn in high school or college, like, we should have, but instead making it a really empowering experience. So I really appreciate both you guys, Mark and Nidhi, for coming on, sharing this insight with us, especially in this challenging time that even though we feel kind of maybe deprived, we're not. We can be empowered, especially working with First Command Financial Services. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Sharita, thank you so much for having us. Honestly, it's our pleasure to get to speak to you and your audience, and just appreciate you having us.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been a real pleasure sharing this information with your families, and we look forward to continuing to serve military families to get on the path to financial security.
Absolutely. Nidhi and Mark, thank you again so much for being our very special guest on this edition of Army Wife Talk Radio. Listeners, I encourage you to get connected with First Command Financial Services to be empowered in your financial security journey. You can do that in person at one of their 180 offices around the world, or you can also do that online with a computer or a phone wherever you're stationed. Check them out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at First Command. It's just like it sounds, the word First Command. Or you can go to their website, firstcommand.com, and click Get Started. You can also reach out to both Mark and Nidhi on LinkedIn by searching their names. So you can search for Mark Steffe, that's last name Steffe. You can find Nidhi on LinkedIn by searching her name, Nidhi space Talati. If you missed that, no worries. You can just go ahead and swipe up and get connected with our show notes or check out complete information on our website under this podcast heading over at armywifenetwork.com. Thanks again to First Command, and now back to our host in the studio.